On episode 3 of Health Rebels, we're speaking to a shining example of what can happen to your life if you change your diet and lifestyle. We're speaking with Tim Kaufman, aka FatManRants. Tim is joining us from Buffalo, New York. Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ian. It's a pleasure.
So this is number 2. The second time we're recording is because of an error on my end, a snafu. I want to get started with life before you became healthier, life before your transition. Talk to us about your weight, the genetic disorder that you spoke about in our last interview and in the Forks Over Knives article, and your addictions to medication and that whole cycle for us.
Okay, yeah, the last one, we'll just chalk that up for a practice run, so that's all good. So basically, the condensed version is, I grew up kind of like any other kid out here in Alden. We kind of live in a rural community, so there's a lot of farms and whatnot. And I started working on a farm at a fairly young age, about 13 or 14. But I noticed I would twist my ankle a lot, and I'd be, my knee would buckle, and I'd kind of fall over that way. And we kind of always just chalked it up as to, being clumsy or accident prone or whatever. But as I got into my early 20s, things started happening. Like I would sneeze, and my shoulder would actually just dislocate just from a sneeze. No. So actually, that was the thing that I went to go get fixed, was my shoulder, because it was almost useless above my head and stuff. And so after a bunch of testing, and they found, the capsule was super extended. They went in to do their surgery called an arthroplasty, and basically they take all the ligaments and tendons, pull them up, and then fold them over each other, and then stitch them to kind of tighten that whole thing back up. And when they got in there, they realized when they started stretching things that they were way too stretchy. So I was diagnosed with a disease called Ehlers-Danlos, and my sister also has it, and she's actually got the genetic testing done at Yale and stuff. So basically, the connective tissue in my body is much more elastic than it should be. And then, the collagen, it lays down scar tissue, connective tissue, all that stuff is just super stretchy. So, obviously, if you ever turn your ankle, there's a fair amount of pain. And so really what we were dealing with, we couldn't do much with loose joints, so you deal with the pain. And I started down a path of painkillers, and it started out with, Lortabs and stuff like that. And then, it went into some Percocets and Oxys, and through the years, you build up a tolerance, and you keep getting more and heavier prescriptions. And then at the same time, I was married at a young age to my high school sweetheart. We got married in our 20s, at 20 actually. So life started getting busy, and my joints started getting worse with age. And we fell into the trap that I think a lot of Americans do with running the kids from practice here and there, and we started, eating, making poor food choices. We would order, pizza and wings out probably 4 nights a week. We'd go out to eat at least once a week, and I was living on fast food. So this whole thing set up this perfect storm. And by the time I was 38, I weighed over 400 pounds, and my life consisted of the couch and poor food choices, and basically doing the minimum I could do to get by through a day to keep working and keep the cycle going.
We spoke about the gastric sleeve and the Forks Over Knives article. Was the gastric sleeve incident with your doctor the turning point? And if it wasn't, what was the turning point?
Well, if I could just go back a little bit on the exercising. At 400 pounds, where I was in life, exercise, no, that's a non-issue. It wasn't about exercise. It was about getting out of bed and getting into my truck. That was a big deal. It was about getting up the stairs, without having to stop more than 4 times and wait to keep moving. So exercise was, I wasn't in the least bit concerned with the exercise. I was concerned with how I was going to get to work in and out of my pickup. But so, I mean, it's hard to say as far as a catalyst. Was it that one thing? And I don't think it was. And I don't think my story's that rare in that regard where it's this one thing, this light bulb went on. I think it's a series of complex events that kind of all mesh together. And I wouldn't want to go back and recreate that, but I think the bypass or the sleeve or the lap band, I think that was later on after I had already decided to do something, because just that in itself, I realized that I had to make a change. So, but before that happened, my mother-in-law got sick with what we thought was a flu or a cold, and my wife, my wife and my mother-in-law were like best of friends, and growing up together, kind of our families were super close. So she was a huge part of our life, and she was getting sicker and sicker, and she just like wasn't getting better. So we said, we better take her in to get checked out. And what had happened is she was diagnosed with leukemia, and it was terrible. She was terribly sick, and we were immersed into a world that we knew nothing about. And at the same time we're dealing with that, my father, who was my best friend, got diagnosed with kidney cancer, and he was given 6 months to live. So we went from trying to survive, week to week and just get through the week to, going to the cancer hospital, which we call in this area Roswell. We started spending almost every night there, and whose turn was it to go up there, and whose turn was it to get the kids home from their practice. So we were immersed into a world we knew nothing about. And I think one of the, if you want to put a catalyst on my story or a turning point, this always comes back to me. I'll never forget walking up into the hospital, and my mother-in-law was so sick, and she was just struggling just to live another day. And I'll never forget walking in there, and she opened up her eyes, and the first word she said to me was, "How's your knee?" And it just crushed me, because I thought, for the first time in my life, I actually saw that, yeah, my knee's fine. What about you? And I started seeing, there's a different perspective here. Watching everyone at Roswell, with chemo and all the sickness there, they stayed there. And yeah, I was hobbling around and limping around in my, my immobilizers and all my splints and that, but I was leaving. I was walking away, and I was going outside, and I was going home. And, up till this point, no one had ever given a time on my lifespan. So, yeah, my legs hurt, but I had legs, and they weren't cutting my legs off because there was a tumor in them. So I started, I guess you could say I started finding gratitude by seeing things through a little bit of a different perspective. That was huge for me. That was huge. But then, months later, my mother-in-law, she lost her battle with leukemia that actually turned into lymphoma. And then my father, who was given 6 months to live, he ended up passing away at 6 weeks after his diagnosis. So a lot of pain and, heartbreaking. Both of us lost our best friends, in literally months of each other. And I can remember when things kind of settled back down and the dust kind of settled, and we tried to get back to it as normal as we possibly could. I can remember getting up for work, and some days I could get my socks and shoes on, some days it just wasn't happening. And I can remember asking my wife, here I am, I'm supposed to be this, big provider and protector for her. And here I am asking her to put my socks and shoes on. So that, that in itself is degrading, But I can remember her looking up at me, and I could still see the pain in her eyes from her mom and my dad. And I knew that if I didn't change something, if something didn't happen, if she's putting my socks and shoes on this year, what's next year going to be? If I wasn't dead, our marriage would sure look different. And how is she going to take care of a 400-pound plus guy, you know? So I went online, I started doing research. I'm like, I have to at least get weight off my joints because I am not going to be walking soon. And that's when I started researching the bariatric surgery. And I found a place here in Buffalo that does a bunch of them. I got all the paperwork sent to me. I went to the meetings. I had everything all set to go. We had, it was sometime in mid-August, I'm going to say 2011. I might be guessing. I don't know. But that's when I was supposed to get it done. And the last thing I had to do is get checked off on my primary that I could have the surgery. And my wife really wasn't too happy with the decision, but I took her to the doctor so I could show her what a good idea this was. And the doctor looked at me and he said, I've signed off for every single one of these. And he said, I'll probably sign off for everyone after you, but I'm not signing for you. And I was crushed. And his reason was, first of all, I was on so much pain medicine. By this point, I was on a drug called fentanyl. And it's super bad stuff. And on top of that, I was taking a bunch of other painkillers and whatever else I could find, whatever I could use to escape life, basically. And he was worried about that. He was also worried, you know, my blood pressure was 255 over 115 on 3 different medicines. And he was worried I was pretty sick. And the last thing he was worried about is if I had rapid weight loss that I would lose muscle and I'd end up in a wheelchair and never get out. And later on we found out, we went back to do an interview with the doctor, and it was pretty sobering because he said his goal was to keep me out of a wheelchair for 30 days. If he could keep me out of a wheelchair for 30 days, it was like a good thing. It was a miracle. And it was pretty weird seeing him say some of the stuff that he said. But so that's where I was. I walked out of the doctor with zero hope, you know?
Yeah. So after that, you know, talk about your little journal entry that's cited in your Forks Over Knives article, and just tell us about the small changes that you made as time went on.
Yeah, so, I think it's what anyone would do. I mean, you go on a diet, right? And I wasn't ever really on too many diets. I think I did Atkins once, but I came from a family of dieters, so I was pretty familiar with how it all works. And I knew I had to do something. So I did what everyone else does. I started journaling my food, you know, and then I was like swapping out like red meat for like turkey, going with a lower fat cheese. Things that I assumed were healthy, the low fat, no fat yogurt and stuff like that. But at the same time, I knew that I needed to keep moving because, I mean, it makes logical sense. You could take a world-class athlete, and if you put his leg in a cast for a few months, when you break the cast off, you know, he's going to have to start all over, basically. And so I knew that this, you know, if this atrophy sets in, and if basically a move it or lose it mentality. So I started writing stuff down. I figured if I could get up out of my chair, which is ironic because the week before I started doing this journal, I went to get out of my chair and I used to push down so hard on the arms that I broke both arms right off the chair. So I got a new chair. And I figured if I could stand up out of the chair once, well, why couldn't I do it twice? So people probably thought I was losing it at work, but I'd stand up and then I'd sit down and I'd stand back up. And that was my goal for the day. You know, log the food, drop the calories, and do a little bit, you know, more work than I did the day before. You know, and then I would hold on to that. I would do the same thing the next day, but I might add, you know, let's try to get up 3 or 4 stairs. And, you know, and if I could get up a half a flight of stairs, why can't I come back down and do the same thing? So, and I saw results. I mean, you know, at over 400 pounds, I'm guessing I was like between 8 and 10,000 calories a day sometimes. I mean, I was eating so much fast food. Any little change, you're going to see big results. And I did. I started losing weight that way.
And at what point did you start to integrate more plants and go plant-based?
I think, well, the first part was gradual. I think everyone knows eat your veggies. They hear it when you're a little kid, and you know that a banana is more healthy than a sausage biscuit with egg and cheese. So and I was still stopping for fast food, but instead of getting two sandwiches, I would get one sandwich and have a couple bananas with it. Um, and it's weird because looking back, I realized I was always hungry. And looking back, my body was starving, but it was starving for nutrition and nutrients, and it wasn't starving for calories. Like most people think when you're starving, it's a lack of calories, but I was starving from lack of nutrition. So, eating one or two bananas before breakfast, I didn't want as much food. And so I started, putting a few fruits and veggies in there, but nothing crazy. And like I said, I was losing weight, but at the same time, I was still on all my medicine. My metabolic numbers were still where they were, and I still felt like crap every day. So I was sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, and Joe Cross's Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead came on. And I figured I'd watch it. And super inspiring film. Joe Cross comes over to the U.S. and he juices for 60 days and basically lives out of his car, just traveling around. Super inspirational. And he loses like almost 60 pounds and he gets off almost all his meds. And I'm like, I should give that a whirl. I should try that. So before the credits even rolled, I had ordered a juicer. And the first of the year was coming up. So that would have been 2011, I think. And I said, I'm going to try. I'm going to try for 30 days and see what happens. So we had never really grocery shopped. If we shopped, it would be after work, picking up a box of pizza rolls or whatever. So what it did really, more than the juicing, is it taught me how to shop. I never, I would never went shopping. And we started, if you juice, I figured to put, 2 carrots and some spinach leaves in there and I'd have juice for the day. And I ended up with about 2 teaspoons of juice. So we had to really start looking where we could get produce, at a reasonable price to make this sustainable for the 30 days at least. But at any rate, after about 6 days into it, I realized that I slept through the first night like that I had slept through in years. I never slept through the night. And I woke up in the same spot that I went to bed. And usually, it was terrible. Nights were terrible for me. That was 6 days into the fast. And then about 2 weeks into the fast, I started noticing, obviously, I was dropping weight, probably over a pound a day, actually. But more than that, I was starting to have less joint pain. I was starting to sweat less. I was waking up with more energy. I felt like $1,000,000. I felt like I hadn't felt in years. And this is 2 weeks. This is not like a long-term thing. And I was feeling great. As I logged in my journal, I was, wanting to do more things and set more little goals. But at the same time, I realized, the 30 days is going to come to an end. I can't possibly do this the rest of my life. And because I watched Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, Netflix came with a suggestion to watch Forks Over Knives. And probably that film, absolutely, I just told Dr. Esselstyn the other day, I'm like, it didn't just save my life, it gave me a completely new one. Because I knew nothing of, plant. I probably didn't even really know what a vegan was, to be honest with you. It's the company I kept and where I live, it's just not a thing. I said I grew up on a farm. We used to process all our own meat. I mean, we were huge meat eaters. And so this whole plant-based lifestyle thing, like I knew nothing about it. But watching that film, it opened my eyes. And I actually watched it 2 times in a row. And I figured, well, why can't I just take everything that I'm juicing and start eating it? And I'll try that for 30 days. And things, the weight just kept coming off, and I kept feeling better and better. And little by little, I started getting off my medicines. I was still on a lot of painkillers, and I was still doing a lot of stupid stuff. I can remember one time drinking kale juice with a big dip of Copenhagen in my mouth. So I had a lot of bad habits, a lot of stuff I had to clean up, but little by little, and the fentanyl was. I would not suggest this to anyone, any of your listeners. If you need to get off fentanyl, you need to go somewhere and get help from a professional. But what I did is every time I had a 3-day patch on, so basically I had a constant supply of fentanyl, and every time I changed a patch, I would just cut a little sliver off it, and just I would have a little bit less every 3 days. And it took a long time, but eventually I got until, the little sliver I was cutting off was the little sliver that I was putting on. So I was able to get off all my pain meds, and then the blood pressure started coming down. Those medicines went away, and before I knew it, I haven't even taken an ibuprofen in a couple of years. So
I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't view your story as a success story. Why have you succeeded when so many other people before you who have tried to diet, who've tried to lose weight, have failed?
Well, it's, I actually been thinking all the time we're talking. I've been really trying to get in the habit of starting everything I do with. In fact, the first slide in my presentations are, people make a big deal out of what I did. And I'm not trying to take anything away from my story. It's that, people say I'm a walking miracle and stuff, but I believe we all are. And what I did, there's nothing special about what I did. There's nothing special about me. And I have a slide in my presentation that says I'm just a fat guy that ate a bunch of apples. And I really believe that. There's no money. There's no magic pill. You don't have to be a certain type. You don't, we're all humans. And this is, I make an analogy to fat birds in my talks, and bird feeders, we fill them all the time, and the birds have a constant supply of food. They eat as much as they want, but you don't see birds in your backyard on little scooters. You don't see fat birds tipped on the side watching TV, because it's what nature provides for them. And no different than when you don't see deer with muffin tops and things like this. So the truth is, we make this too complicated. It's just eat the food that was designed for us. It shouldn't come in a box. It shouldn't come in wrappers. And it's nothing crazy. So what I think, personally, I think people make too many excuses, because the truth is, knowing where I am now compared to where I was, you could have told me to eat just about anything, and I would have eaten it. But it makes so much sense that it's so natural. It's so, it just makes so much sense. I don't know why it doesn't work for people. It doesn't work for people because they don't do it right. And the truth is, most of the time when I get in an argument, and the protein thing always comes up, when you really get to the core of it, they don't want to change. It has nothing to do with the science. It has nothing to do with how many grams of protein. It nothing to do with that. When you really back them in the corner, they'll say, I don't want to. I like the taste of this better than I like whatever,
And you're never going to change that. I mean, you can give them the information. You can lead a horse to water. You can't make them. You can't force kale down their throat. Through your health journey, have you had any role models or big influences?
Other than, I think this is a big key too. I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. I had the movie Forks Over Knives, and I guess I didn't really, I didn't even know Dr. Esselstyn's name or Colin Campbell. I didn't know any of those guys. I just knew that they were in the movie, and that kind of came later. And I'm almost glad that I didn't, because for a couple of years I felt like I was on an island, and now I'm very connected in the plant-based community. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm like, this is why I don't know why people don't make the change, but I can tell you why they don't stick with it, because they're not connected to a community. It's a key factor in this. But at the same time, I look back and I think if I would have had a role model and if I would have had people to follow, I would have done what I think a lot of people try to do to me. I'll get a message, what kind of shoes do you wear? or what kind of Garmin, whatever. They're looking at the wrong things. And I think part of the journey is getting educated and screwing up and just kind of flailing around and finding your own way, because we want to make things so easy that if you could bottle this whole thing up and say, here's a protocol, eat Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, eat this stuff, and it works for everyone, I don't think I would have done it. I think, and I still mess up, I just ditched oil not even a year ago. So no, I had no clue what I was doing, and I'm kind of glad I didn't have a role model. I do now. And I think that helps because, like I say, the community aspect is huge. But I'm glad I kind of flailed around with having no clue what I was doing, because it was more pure that way. It was like I found out, the research is what drove me to want to become more healthy, and not some guy that I looked. I mean, it would have been cool to have Josh LaJaunie out there years ago. But there's a good chance I would have saw his 7:30 pace while I'm out trying to walk, a mile in an hour, and I would have been like, screw it. So I'm glad I didn't have a role model. I do now.
That's interesting. Who's your role model now?
Oh, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I look up to Josh, and it's funny because we always think role models are these people we put up, but I got some people out there that they're just starting their journey, and like they're so passionate, and they're my role. Justin Lacey's another one. He's killing it, and he's such an awesome guy. And I think we get messed up with that, with role models having to be, these perfect examples. But passion is what I'm after, and people with passion, they become my role models.
And I know for a fact that a lot of people see you as a role model, Tim, just from your and I want to maybe this is a good time to get into. I really like your Facebook page. You have a blog as well, and you're also coming up in a movie, right? It's called Big Change. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, Jason Cohen, who has a really cool story. He lost 120 pounds. He's probably somebody you want to interview.
Okay.
A friend gave him a bicycle because he was moving out of town. And so Jason's like, a bicycle? What am I going to do with that? And he started riding, and he ended up losing 120 pounds, and he's plant-based now. He's a super cool guy, but he's a photographer, and he does some filmmaking. And he got this idea that on Netflix, there's a lot of like good movies out there, but and some of them have inspirational parts, but his idea was to make a movie that's like all inspiration and doesn't go so much into the plant-based, but just shows, this is where life was, this is where it is now, and it's out there for anyone, and big change is possible, turning the impossible into possible. So at any rate, he's there's going to be 4 people in the documentary. Josh LaJaunie's one of them, and then I'm the second one. It was really cool. They came out here for a week in the summer, and they, we chased drones around on our bicycles, and we did some hiking and stuff. Super cool opportunity, so I'm excited about it.
Neat. And when's that movie coming out,
I don't know. I found out, because I didn't know. I thought, well, you just make a movie and, upload and it's out. But this is quite an undertaking. And he's doing, right now, all the money's coming out of his pocket. Just like right now, it's just like a work of passion for him. So it would be cool if he could get some backing. So he's got to feed his family too. So he's out working, and then this is kind of what he's doing. So I don't know. I think the goal is about a year to actually get it out.
The last line in your Forks Over Knives article is particularly moving. It was to me, and powerful, where you're thanking the Forks Over Knives, the makers of Forks Over Knives, and you say, "There's no doubt in my mind that my family would have already buried me if I hadn't switched to a plant-based diet." How do you impress upon people who are struggling with their health that, guys, now is the best time to start? And sort of a two-part question, and what additional advice or motivation would you give people who say, wow, Tim is a lot like me, and who are struggling to get started?
Well, I don't like. I can only speak from my own perspective, but I know. I call it like it is. I was an addict, and not just food. I mean, I was addicted to a lot of things, and I think that is key. Like if I found food to be one of my favorite drugs, but there were many others. Um, and I think, as harsh as this sounds, addiction is stems from selfishness, and it may not where it ends up. Maybe that's not all the time true, but where it starts is about I and me. And for me, regardless of the circumstances that were going on, I wanted to escape. I did not want reality. The more escapes I could get, the better. Um, and looking back, that's sad. That's sad. I got a wife and two kids and an awesome marriage and healthy kids, and I got a great job and a roof over my head. But all I wanted to do was escape. So from the addiction standpoint, if addictions are selfish, I hit a point in my life that it wasn't about me anymore, and it was about my wife. And basically, I love my wife enough to do anything for her. So if it meant going against my own selfish ways of addiction, then that's what I'm going to do. So I guess at the end of the day, if you told me, hey, you need to get healthy so your numbers get better, if I don't care about myself enough, honestly, there were a lot of nights I would go to sleep. I didn't know if I was waking up in the morning, and I don't know if I really cared. I don't think I was suicidal per se, but I didn't really care if I was living. And now, even this morning, I'm trying to sleep in, and 4:45, I'm up out of bed, like, I want to go. So if I could show people what that feels like, I know you can't, but if I could show you what it feels like to go from not caring if you wake up in the morning to worrying you're sleeping too much because you're going to miss out on how awesome life is, I'm going to start crying. If I could show people what that feels like, there'd be no question. They would do whatever any one of those books on your shelf say.
I think a lot of people who are going to watch this, who are going to see your passion and say, you know what, let's start making small changes. And like you said earlier, I think something else that was powerful was I almost took this from you, where you continually emphasize small changes over time. You yourself, you didn't, you made small changes over time. You didn't lose 100 pounds in a month. The weight loss takes time, and the learning process takes time, and but it's worth it, as you said, as your passion conveys. And
Right, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the thing about it is, I look back, and we didn't really talk about this too much, but the first walk, as I journaled stuff, and I remember my wife would ask me, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And I'd be like, "What's wrong with the car? Is it broken?" But the first walk we took was 0.74 miles, and it took almost an hour. And she had to come pick me up, because I just and I was actually, I was out for like 2 days, ice on my legs. It was terrible. But I think that 0.74 mile walk was a huge change for me. And now, looking back, that was probably the most critical thing I've ever done for physical activity. But the 0.74 turns into a mile, and then I love the outdoors. I grew up hunting and fishing. I love being outside, so I bought hiking shoes, which I was always told to be on flat ground for my ankles and whatnot. And I started hiking, and then I started hiking up hills, and I developed a passion for the mountains. And one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me is my wife and I, just this past August, we climbed Mount Washington, which is the highest peak in the East Coast here, and we're up over 6,000 feet, and I put her backpack on, and I can remember thinking, she used to put my socks and shoes on, and now I'm helping her get up to the summit, on the summit cone of this mountain, and it's like, it's crazy to think how far that one little thing of 0.74 miles. I think I've done like 7 or 8 half marathons. I've done a full marathon, a couple centuries. And that stuff's cool, and I almost don't even like talking about it, because that stuff's so far off in the future. If you would have told me I was going to be running a 5K and after getting my legs casted for braces, that's craziness. But 0.74 miles, I think anyone, and the other thing too is people say, well, I can't do this. They tell you what they can't do, but what about looking at what you can do? Maybe you can't walk 0.74 miles right now, but can you get to the end of your driveway to get to paper? Do it twice. Everybody can do something. I believe that.
So if you'd like to get in touch with Tim, I know he has a Facebook page, FatManRants, where you also post your blog articles. Any other social media plugs that you'd like to give us?
Yeah, pretty much if you search up FatManRants, I put stuff out on Twitter. I've never even been on there. My food, everyone wants to know food. And I was making videos, and how video editing goes. It was taking me so much time. So most of my food goes on Instagram. That's a cool place. Like I just use that to dump all my food pictures off, and then I'll put a little brief description, because that's, again, back to the role model thing, like no one told me how to cook. I just would bring home a bag of carrots, and I think that's people's biggest thing is, great, I have all this produce, what do I do? So I'm very conscious. Like right now, the food doesn't, that's kind of the last thing on my list. But I realize it's a first thing on other people's list. So my food goes on Instagram. That's kind of big. And yeah, people can find me.
Cool. And I'll post those down in the description. But Tim, for the second go around, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I really, really enjoy hearing your story, even though this is the second time, because it's inspirational for me. And I know that a lot of other people will look at this and will take something out of this and implement it into their lives. But Tim, you're a plant-based ambassador, and I wish you success, and keep doing what you're doing with your Facebook page. I enjoy seeing your posts on my newsfeed, and I hope that we meet in the future and go for a bike ride.
Yeah, it's terrible. You're right down the road, right?
Right.
We haven't met yet, so yeah, we have to change that.
Well, I just gotta zip down the thruway, and we'll meet up sometime.
Yeah. All right, Ian. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you, Tim. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.